first, again, congratulations.
Thank you.
And I want to start asking, what motivated you to depict a narrative about a family's vacation, presenting a complex relationship and mixing elements of coming-of-age cinema and road movies in your first feature film?
Yeah, I think something you said last night really takes its cue from my short, For Nonna Anna. And in that film, it's about a trans woman and her relationship with her Italian grandmother. And both women are kind of going through issues of body consciousness, as Chris, the main character, is coming into her own and really starting to feel like she's seeing herself when she looks at the reflection in the mirror. Her grandmother's losing her sense of self. And it's really about two women seeing each other and seeing their experiences reflected back at each other. And it's not about Chris being trans or being accepted by her family. All those things have already happened. It's really a question of okay, what now? What happens after transition? And something you said last night, I would say, is similar to that, in that it's not about Ren coming out. It's not about her transition. It's really about her relationship with her family. In the film, I think she's a daughter, she's a granddaughter, she's a sister, she's all those things first, and she's a trans woman second. And to me, it was just important to depict that because we just don't see it enough. People are so obsessed with the mechanics of transition. And I just want to tell a different story.
Yes. So, how did the events of your life influence the construction of the film? The family has Italian descent. Mm-hmm. So I suppose you were inspired by some elements from your own experience.
Yes. I would say that the family in the film is similar to my family. They're not exact replicas, which my mom always tells me because she hates the character of Mona. But I think they are representations of people in my family. They're a mosaic of people in my life. And my aunts, my cousins, my sister, my brother, my parents. Don't tell my mom again. But I think in my experience, I wanted to depict a family that just accepted and loved and supported and annoy. I mean, that's part of it as well. But I think I just wanted to tell a different story. We see the same one over and over again about the family's acceptance. And I wanted to tell a story about a girl who's already accepted. When I came out to my family, I came out to my grandmother and she was like, it's not a big deal. Jesus loves everyone and I'll take care of the rest of the family. And it's that energy that I wanted to depict.
And although something you said last night is a fictional film, it is also biographical. Is your personal experience also Carmen Madonia's experience? Does she, as a character and trans actress, mirror yourself as a trans woman and filmmaker?
So Carmen and I were lucky enough to work on this role for almost a year and a half, 2 years together with an acting coach. So in that time, we really got to know each other quite well, and we realized that our lives are actually quite similar. The way we grew up, she's also Italian Canadian. She also had a very close relationship with her nonna. This is a really funny one. We both went to the National Ballet of Canada, and we didn't know each other, but we both went to that school. And so there were all these parallels in our lives, but there are differences, I would say, in Carmen that I got to infuse into the character of Renata. One of the biggest things is her vape. Originally, she was never supposed to vape, but over the year and a half of working with her, she always had this damn vape. And I was like, this is a very interesting and cool character tick. And obviously she really leans on it in some way. So I ended up writing it into the story, and now it's how could that character not be a vapor in the end? So yeah, I think it was a marriage between some of the elements in me, some of the elements in her, and kind of putting it together to come up with this Renata.
Nice. And despite the conflict, the film talks a lot about family support and forgiveness. Can you tell us about the importance of these feelings associated with the story of commonly marginalized characters?
Yes, I think right now we're at a moment where we're seeing more marginalized characters, which is great. But on the other side of that, what we're also seeing is a lot of marginalized characters being put on a pedestal and kind of being given this hero status where they don't have flaws. And to me, it was really important to show a character who was trans, but wasn't always a good person, doesn't always make the right choices. And so organically, there are those themes of like forgiveness in there, and there's those themes of support and love. I think when you tell an authentic story and about a person in a human way, like those elements just come out naturally. Yeah. And then the other thing too, I think that's interesting is like you don't know what this family is like outside of this little vacation, and really like their only lifeline to kind of having any kind of like social life is each other. So their lives become very small and insular in that moment. And the thing about families is that like those are probably the people who can like annoy you the most because they know exactly what buttons to press. So I think on one hand there's a lot of annoyance, and then on the other hand there's a lot of forgiveness because you can't be pissed off with the only person that you know while you're on holidays. So I think there's a lot of that going on as well.
And in relation to the previous question and what you say in the beginning, both in this film and in For Nonanena, you bring trans characters, but placing the focus more on the family relationship than on this issue of transgender. And what led you to bring this particular vision?
I think because I'm just bored with stories about transition, to be honest. I think it's just boring. We get it. We know it. Like, let's tell other stories. And then I think when you tell other stories, it gives people other options. Like, I think if you talk to Carmen about this role, she says that it changed her life because she was allowed to see a version of herself, like a version of her reality that she could have. She could have a close relationship with her sister. She could have a close relationship with her family, which she only really realized after working on this for so long. It gave her a different option than what she's always been programmed to see, I guess.
And what are the difficulties associated with this production of films with characters and things like this?
Yeah, I mean, I think at every stage we've just gotten a lot of no's. When I wrote it, I got a lot of no's because they couldn't see how the film would turn out. They couldn't understand, like, well, if you have a trans character, why is no one talking about her being trans? And I got a lot of questions about that, and a lot of questions about, like, can you write that in more? And me being like, no, I can't write that in. And even at this stage, when the film is done and it's in front of you, there's still a lot of questions from people about why it's not talked about more. And I think in some ways it's quite a block, especially I think for American distributors. I think they have a hard time with it, to be honest. Yeah. I think the other challenge too with making trans cinema is like, it's not just about the people in front of the camera, it's also just important to have trans people behind the camera as well. So on this film, we created a mentorship, and we invited 5 trans youth to come on set with us and be with us in pre-production all the way through to production. I wish it was post-production, but it wasn't. And that meant that there was trans presence in every department. So I didn't realize this at the time, but after it was all done, Carmen came up to me and she was like, thank you for doing that, because it meant that when she woke up in the morning, she knew when she sat in the makeup chair, there was a trans girl doing her makeup. When she was getting dressed, she knew there was a trans girl getting her dressed. When she was on set, she knew that there was a trans girl behind the camera. And there were dolls all across the crew. We knew that there were trans women throughout the entire crew. And I think those kinds of choices ultimately led to the film that you see on screen.
And last question.
Okay.
What changes do you think still need to occur both in the narrative and production context in queer cinema?
I think that's a great follow-up question to my last answer. And again, like I think we're seeing more queer representation on screen, but we're still behind when it comes behind the screen. And even like we're doing what we can to get people on set, but then it's like, what about the decision makers? What about the people funding the projects? What about the people buying the projects? It's like we've gone to the point where now we're making the films that we've been asking for, but now it's still a question of how do we get those films to the audiences that are asking for them. There's still the gatekeepers, right, that are stopping the films from being seen, from being loved, from being shown around the world because they think that's too much of a risk. I think that's like the next level in like queer representation and trans representation and POC representation. It's like, okay, let's get more of those people, not just behind the camera and in front of the camera, but actually like at the table making decisions about what ends up in cinemas ultimately.
Okay, wait, I want to get a picture. Okay, get close. Okay, here we go. Smile. Say cheese.
Cheese.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going now. See you later.